My name is LC Clemons. I run my own company called Collaborative Communities. I founded my company because I was a pissed off community member. Right on, yeah, woo! So I am going to say some things that may come across as kind of insulting to the experts that run charrettes out the wazoo. I think that you do a really shitty job most of the time. Even the ones that are highly successful that you walk around patting yourself on the back, most of the community, we don't know that it ever happened. And you think that you did a really good job of engaging us, and you think that you listened, and then you went back to your ivory tower in the sky, and we feel really left out. The most left out people are the ones that we're supposedly designing the cities for in the future. Who would those be?
Children.
Young people under the age of 18. How often are you asking people under the age of 18 what they want their city to look like? Are most of your charrettes filled with people over 50? Yes, they are, because who has extra time? People over 50. People under 18 have time too, but nobody thought to ask them. So I want to play a little audio file real quick for you guys.
Let's start right at the beginning. What motivates you to be an activist in your community?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's seeing injustices around me and recognizing my privilege from a very young age that allowed me to see the contrast and try to work towards equalizing that out. When I was younger, I grew up in a very low-income household, but I was still doing better, and I felt like I was doing better than a lot of my peers, and I saw how they were treated unjustly through a system, not by any one individual. And as I got older and I could put words to that and I could work on actual topics that could change that, it really manifested into creating a space for other people to do the same thing.
So can you remember the first time you found yourself getting involved in becoming an activist? Was there a particular cause or event?
I don't know about when I was little very much so, because I don't think I ever really had the chance. It was more like when I was in high school. I remember the first thing I ever volunteered for. I was advocating for the inclusion of complete streets in a competitive grant process for cap and trade funding. So it was to advocate that when they looked at the grantees who were asking for grant funding from the cap and trade money, that they included that the applicants had to have complete streets and transportation solutions for a lot of different people in their application.
So I played that because what I hear a lot of times when I talk about engaging young people, that it's done in to be honest, sort of a superficial way. We're gonna engage them, but they're too young to really know anything about what I do. I'm an expert, I've gone to college, I'm all very smart. I know more than the community members do. I have to teach them. I'm going to hear their ideas, but then I'm going to process it because I can understand things. And at the end of the day, I'm the expert and they're just regular people. And what I have found, I've been looking for a way to hack the system, right? How do you decentralize power? If we're constantly in the same game of who are the least engaged community members and how do they get access to driving the decisions of the future that are going to make the communities of their future, why don't we just hand control over to them? Really, actually fully. Not I want to hear you and then I'm going to go to my office and I'm going to do things and I'm going to come back and show you what I've done. No. Why don't they go to their classroom and do it themselves and then they show you and then you help them modify and refine it and then they drive it. They are the boss. You work for them. They are the ones actually doing the work themselves, and through so doing, they're learning how to be designers and architects and planners and economic development specialists and all of the things that we want to teach young people how to do. And they're getting invested in their communities. And this came to me because I lived through this. This is in 2011. We had 67 tornadoes in Alabama that hit in one 24-hour period. It took out 80% of our state was a federally declared disaster zone. This is the tornado that ripped through, it started on the Mississippi state line and it stayed on the ground almost all the way to Georgia. It was 1.5 miles wide. They had to come up with a new name for tornadoes after this thing because it didn't fit any of the patterns, it didn't behave. It was called a supercell, just like Superstorm Sandy didn't behave because it was not a hurricane. They had to come up with a new lexicon because of what it did to us. I took these photographs. This is about a mile from my house. My neighbor and I just sat there watching this thing go by because we knew if it hit us, there was no hiding from it. Many of the tornadoes ripped grass out of the ground. There were no basements left. It killed 256 Alabamians that day. It killed over 1,000 people throughout the Southeast. It's the deadliest tornadic outbreak that has ever been documented anywhere in the world. And most of you probably have never heard about it. You don't want to have a disaster on a busy media cycle. The president assassinated Osama bin Laden 2 days after that, so we lost a lot of media coverage, all the trucks left, and so we didn't get a lot of help. So when it comes to the community engagement process that happened, AIA, we have a really strong AIA chapter, American Institute of Architects chapter in Alabama, and they did a really wonderful thing in trying to pull together a ROOT Act, which I, as a regular citizen, community member, had never heard of and didn't know what it was. And it's apparently, now that I lived through it and I was one of the community members that got pulled in, I was sent to the National Charrette Institute. They came to town and they taught us, the locals, the regular people, what a charrette was and how we could run it ourselves and how we were going to be the subject matter experts. And they did, what you do is you get the community members to actually drive you teach the experts, like what is the history of your community, what's important to you, etc. This process was really successful in many ways, and AIA goes around the country and talks about how successful this ROOT Act program was, and it was successful in many ways. But it was missing a huge contingent, which was anyone under 50. And so I kept saying, hey guys, I really think that you're missing out on young people. We really need to reach out to them. And they were like, yeah, we're really super engaging everybody. And I'm like, but you're not. So my sister reminded me when I was like super pissed that nobody would listen, like none of the experts would listen to me. And my sister was like, you're a school teacher. You could just do it yourself. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to be the doer. So I did it myself with no money and no support or assistance from the city whatsoever, and really just pulling together the people that I knew that were like me and felt kind of pissed off about the situation as well. I did a writing assignment with this. I went to the school in the neighborhood that was affected. This is a historically impoverished, disinvested, poor black community. I know that's a shocking thing that there are communities of color that are hit by disasters on the daily. And I went to the English teachers and I put out a writing assignment with them, and I said, I want you to put this out to your students, and I don't actually care what their grammar or spelling is. And then they all are like, oh my God, no. And I said, I want to just get like genuine, honest feedback from the young people about, it said, do you want to change the world? Win this writing contest and I'll show you how. And because it turns out that young people really do want to have control over their destiny. And so we did this writing assignment, and the teachers collected like 60 essays, and I read through all of them, and that dictated what I was going to the experts that I would bring in, because they told me what they wanted their community to be. It was called My Pratt City, what I want my community to be. And I asked them the question, like, what would this city need to be for you to want to live here? What does it need to be for you to stay here for college or come back from college, etc.? And they told me. They had very clear ideas as to what they wanted built back first. They wanted the car wash to come back, which really surprised me because I was like, that's weird. It was kind of a dumpy car wash. And they're like, that's where every Sunday everybody in the neighborhood hangs out. That's where I get to see my friends, my family. That's where they fellowship after church, is at the car wash. So the car wash was a lot more than a car wash, and I wouldn't have known that. They know that. And they said, cars drive too fast in front of the school. My little sister was almost hit by a car. I've almost been hit by a car. So I was like, I need a transportation engineer. Oh, I need somebody from economic development. So I let their essays drive the experts that I brought in. And then the next step was to find the experts. This took me about 2 weeks. I reached out to a bunch of people throughout the city that I knew. And I said, hey, I've heard of transportation engineering. Can you come and talk? You only have 5 minutes. And you have to talk at 5th grade level, and the transportation engineers were like, we can't do that. And I was like, that's why nobody knows what you do. I found a transportation engineer that could. I've got an economic development person. They came in, they got their 10 minutes to speak. The young people got to ask them questions. It was very messy and sloppy in the beginning because the young people have never been put in a position of power. And I hijacked a lot of this from Martin Luther King Jr. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, so the civil rights movement is deeply entrenched in what I think that Dr. King did a lot of great things. And one of the things that he did is put the very young children, pull them out of school and put them on the front lines of the marches. And what it did is it put a much different face to the disparity of what is happening, the impact of what is happening. And so by the politics in Birmingham are so terrible that there was not going to be a lot of action from adults, because the mayor had gotten in a fist fight with a city council member from this neighborhood, and then he wasn't going to let any money go into it. But by the time these young people were done with a 2-day session, and I can give you guys information as to how to do this in your community for like practically no money, and it's super easy, they were able to, after only 2 days, they were fully articulate about what they wanted, how they wanted to do it, which buildings they wanted to revitalize, because I told them that they could do it themselves. I would help set them up with a law firm, they could create a nonprofit, they could fundraise, they could hire a designer, they could hire the architect, they could do it themselves, and they're like, us, we're just kids. And I said the Olsen twins were managing a multi-million-dollar empire by 16. And they were like, true. So everything that we did, every time they'd say, I want this, I would make them repeat, I pledge to be the change I want to see in my community. They had to take ownership. If they wanted a stop sign, day 2 of the engagement was that they had to do research on what it cost to do all the things they wanted to do. And then they had to figure out how to fundraise, because I taught them, if you're going to go to city council, you take a bird in hand. And you say, look, we have researched and found out that a stop sign that we very desperately need so that we don't die is $250. And we've raised $250. We would like, little children, we would like to partner with the city, and we would like for you to install our stop sign. We've already raised the money. Now, do you think any city council member is going to say no to children that are asking to not die while crossing the street to go to school? No. Because you don't want to be the mean asshole like adult that does that. So what I did is, the accidental byproduct, and I know I'm way over my time, but way over. But this is important. This is the hack for how to decentralize. You have politics at play, right? There's squabbling and all of this. People don't get in the, adults get out of the way of kids, right? These young people, they get out of the way. They say, let's lift them up. They're doing things themselves. Yes, it's so cute. It gets us good media. The mayor loves it. Everybody looks like a savior. But really what has happened is now these kids, this was 6 years ago, they all went on to go to school. One of the young men, this young man right here, he keeps in touch with me. He has now, it took him about 2 years after this, he started his own fund to fund other young people to get into college, right? They're starting their own foundations. That 2 days, it took 2 days, right? This is not like a long-term thing that it takes tons of money and a lot of effort. This is very simple, and so I want to encourage you all to know that the children are our future. And you need to engage them and treat them like they are intelligent, functioning people, and they actually need to be the ones running things. And you are there only to serve, to facilitate for them, and teach them the language to tell you what you need to do for them.